Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Whitney, and I am a policy analyst on the youth team at CLASP, also known as Center for Law and Social Policy. As many of you may or may not know, June is Pride and Immigrant Heritage Month. Woo! I'm excited. Pride is the national holiday that uplifts and celebrates LGBTQIA plus folks and their history across the nation. Immigrant Heritage Month celebrates the accomplishments and contributions immigrants and their children have made in shaping the history, strengthening the economy, and enriching the culture of the United States. To celebrate both cultures this month, we have decided to profile and interview some youth and young adults that are doing work around these topics. Over the next couple of weeks, we will have class will be posting these videos on our IG page as well as our class website. With that being said, let's get started. Today we will be speaking with Ricky. Ricky, can you introduce yourself, name, community, organization, and what do you do? Also, your pronouns.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ricardo Chavez. I just graduated from high school. I use any and all pronouns. I'm from Oklahoma City, and I work with Dream Action Oklahoma, which is a local immigrant rights organization here in Oklahoma. I work and serve as the programs director. And so, what that means is that I get to serve my community through the various programs that we have. The main ones have been DACA renewal clinics, engaging with high school students through our chapters. And then now we are expanding into adding a few other components to our programs.
Wow. And you're only just now graduated from high school. I wish I was doing this much in high school. I couldn't have imagined it. That's awesome. So Ricky, what does Pride and Immigrant Heritage Month mean to you?
Yeah. So I think for me, it's a very interesting dynamic between the two. I grew up in a mixed status family, so I always understood the complexities of coming from an immigrant background. My parents were undocumented for a good portion of my time growing up, as well as my older sisters. And so I had to navigate what that meant and how to navigate my privilege in that setting. But I also, on the other hand, grew up knowing that I was a little bit different than all of my other friends. I would always remember going to parties with my family, and everyone would always ask me like, "Oh, do you finally have a girlfriend?" And I would always just be like, like I don't know how to like answer this, so I would just say no, because I knew that I didn't like girls, and so it was very difficult for me to kind of find my space within both of my identities. I always felt like I had to choose one over the other. But actually, once I grew up a little bit more, and even when I stepped into the world of organizing and I got to join Dream Action Oklahoma, I really got to understand how both identities are me and how I don't have to like be selective with them. I can embrace both. And so it's been very interesting that now I can embrace both. I can go to family parties and I can talk and relate with my immigrant culture and my heritage, but I also can talk about my queer identity and relate all of the things and just make sure that it encompasses me and not just parts of me. And so I think that's what I am like, yeah, that's just the thing that I enjoy most, especially around Pride time, because I can really just talk about all aspects of my identity, and it's like a time where I can actually celebrate it, and I don't feel like I have to hide anymore.
That is beautiful. I wholeheartedly agree with all of those sentiments. Being a queer woman of color and trying to figure out that balance, and so it's a beautiful thing when you are able to be yourself and be free and embrace all of those identities. And so I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome. And you kind of already hit on our next question, like intersectionality and what are you doing at Dream Action to ensure that they are having this intersectional lens as well.
Yeah. So I think kind of with sharing that, I think it's also important to like acknowledge that coming from an immigrant background and even just from a Hispanic community growing up, like we don't really talk about queer bodies. We don't really acknowledge. We kind of try to avoid it because it's uncomfortable in our community. And so for us at Dream Action Oklahoma, it's really important to understand that we can be undocumented, but that is not our only identity. Like there, it goes so far beyond it. There can be undocu-queer people. There can be people who are differently abled, people of color. Like it's a broad spectrum, and so for us, it's just really important to embrace someone for their whole selves. And so, um, something that we've started doing is that we've tried to embed a form of queer education into all of our programs. Whenever we go and talk to students, we try to include that. Every time we introduce ourselves, we talk about pronouns, especially when we're in spaces with our older folks from our community who maybe are not used to it. We make sure to really explain the purpose of pronouns, why we use them, how it affects people within our community, and why it's so important. And so we try to do all of those small things, and then especially around Pride Month, and even we try to do it a month before in May. We try to do some educational, like sit down forums with our community to really talk about what we're about to see in Pride Month and why it's so important to really uplift our community and stand in solidarity with one another.
Nice. That's amazing. Honestly, maybe we should call you to come do the education we were planning for our organization. But is there, when you think about the things that you've learned about yourself and the things that you're doing and Dream Action and how they move forward in the work, is there something missing in society that isn't actually, like, people aren't actually having these conversations? Like, what is missing in society for people to move forward to be able to talk about intersectionality and the different identities people carry, and how we can, as a people, to acknowledge and appreciate those identities.
Yeah. Um, I think sometimes what's missing is just like being vulnerable. And I think it's because of kind of how society has shaped us into talking about all of the issues, not even just queer issues, but any issue that we're not used to or we're not experiencing ourselves. We always kind of put up like a defensive front. We're too afraid to be called out. We're afraid to be wrong. And so I think something that's super important is to always be open-minded and vulnerable when we talk about the things that are affecting us and when we're listening to others about the things that are affecting them. We just need to approach everything with an open mind. I know I've shared that like at Dream Action Oklahoma, we're doing so many things to try and be inclusive. But I think the other thing too is we know we're not the experts. We know that we don't know everything and we're not going to ever know everything. And so it's super important for us to not only educate our community, but to learn alongside them. And so I think that's the biggest thing that's even helped within my family. Like when I first came out to my parents, they were super confused and they didn't know what was next. Like they didn't know how to have conversations with me. And so I also had to not expect them to just know everything off the bat. And
Mhm.
so together we have kind of had conversations. I remember when I first came out, my mom would watch things on the news, and then especially around queer issues, and she would come back and she'd be like, "Okay, I didn't understand. Like, what is the difference between like someone who dresses feminine and someone who's like a performer, like a drag queen?" And like she would just try to understand all of the different complexities, and so even there were questions I didn't know how to answer. And so we would just sit down and answer them together. So I think that's the biggest thing that's kind of missing with all of this is just being open minded and not feeling like you have to know everything,
Mhm.
but also taking the time to learn it alongside the people who need you to know it and learn alongside with them.
Right. Yeah, I think that is beautiful advice, and I think that is you're right that vulnerability is something that the world is missing right now. especially in the times that we're living in. I had this conversation with a friend recently, and I think one of the things that I told them is like, for some people, for somebody to from start from somewhere, to learn, to grow, to understand what other people are going through, they have to first acknowledge that they are carrying this bias, or carrying this lack of knowledge about this group or this identity. And so that's the first step. And then once you figure out what you don't know, that's when you can learn what you can start to learn, and grow from that. And so yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. So I appreciate that. And so and thinking about how the world is on fire right now, literally and figuratively, in every single way. There's Black Lives Matter protests happening around the country. We're still in a pandemic. Well, both are a pandemic actually, where we're facing structural racism and all these things, and then this pandemic and worrying about your health. And a lot of things have been canceled. A lot of things have been closed. Pride has officially, like most pride parades have been, are now obsolete in the month of June, where people usually take this time to celebrate. What are you going to do to celebrate in the midst of all of this?
Yeah. So kind of like a shameless plug here. My sister has actually started a business, and she like hand letters things, and she prints it out. She makes vinyl, stickers, all of those things. And so for us, we like normally I would want to go to like a pride and like to parades and all of that here in Oklahoma. Um, I've actually only gone once, so I went last year. This year I was kind of hoping to go and really get to celebrate it. I think more than before because I'm a lot more comfortable with my identity now than I was even a year ago. But obviously, with everything going on, that's not really in the picture. And so, what we've done is we've actually decided that we wanted to like work on this business, and so we've been creating like buttons and stickers and things like that to celebrate Pride, but also like I think what you mentioned is so important in that right now is a time of celebration, but it's also a time where like we are fighting other battles as well, and it's important to stand in solidarity. And so for us, like all of the proceeds that we're getting, we're donating to the Black Lives Matter movement, because we understand that like for me to have my rights as a queer person, like it took people of color to fight, and it took so many communities, and so we need to stand in solidarity even right now, as other communities are also fighting. And so that's what I'm doing. I think it really hit home because in Oklahoma, we our organizing is a little bit different, because we're like in such a conservative state, and like it's definitely a lot smaller. We rely heavily on partnerships and coalitions, and so we actually here locally have a coalition, and we're partners with BLM OKC, and
Nice.
so we were out doing and supporting with protests here locally, and that was happening the weekend as it was like turning to June 1st. And I remember waking up on June 1st, and a few of my friends were sending me like Happy Pride, despite like me having just posted pictures of like protests that I was at. And so I really had to like check myself, and also just like be super honest with like yes, Pride is a time to celebrate, but we can't like dismiss what's happening in the world right now, and we have to really acknowledge it. So I think that that's what's important for me right now is yes, I want to celebrate, but I also want to not distract from other things that are definitely important and that are happening right now in our world.
Yeah, that's very real. Um, but it's and thank you, as a black woman who don't even have words for what's happening right now, and don't have words for all the things. So I appreciate you and your sister creating these buttons and these stickers and things of that nature. If is there a way someone can get access to these things? How can we support you? How can we buy these things?
So like I said, we're just starting. So she doesn't have like a website or anything. It's literally just been like a Google form. You can follow her on Instagram. It's at Splendidly Scripted. But I mean, we're only like pushing it out to our friends and like locally. We obviously, if we could get more people to like help us out and to buy from us, that's great. But I mean, we're just trying to do what we can here. Also, being stuck at home, it's definitely something that we've had a little bit more time to invest into. So, yeah.
Nice. Yes. And you gave out the shameless plug for your sister's IG. If anybody wants to follow up on any resources or information that you share with us today, how can I contact you? Where can they find you?
Yeah. So give me a second because I don't even know my own handles. This is so it's Ricky with two Y's underscore Chavez, two Z's, on Instagram. And yeah, I mean, that's really the main place where I'm active the most. Also, if you want to check out Dream Action Oklahoma, I help them with our Facebook page as well. So you can always send messages there to get resources, or you can check out our website, which is daok.org. Um, those are the best places to find me.
Nice. Well, it's been a pleasure really talking to you, Ricky. I thank you for all of this information you've shared with us. And I think this will be very helpful to our followers and the people that look to class for information and resources. We really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing in Oklahoma and across this nation. Sending you much love and peace during this time. And I hope you find some space to, self-care and celebrate even in just the smallest moments because it's still needed um, to find that joy.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you today and to really share with folks outside of just Oklahoma all the work that is happening here. I know I talk about it sometimes locally, but sometimes Oklahoma gets overlooked. We're kind of like in the middle, but there's definitely a lot happening here, and we're definitely with and working to be noticed a little bit more with all the work that's happening. So it's always a pleasure to share with folks outside and just to connect. So thank you. I really appreciate it.